The capacity to learn new words is an ability that remains active across the lifespan. An important aspect of new word learning is the role of underlying memory systems. In broad terms, memory consists of three related stages: encoding, maintenance, and retrieval. Encoding describes the initial acquisition of new information. Storage is where new information is maintained over time. Retrieval is the ability to access stored knowledge at some point in the future. So let's say, for example, that you have only just met me today. For learning to be successful, your brain would first need to encode my name in association with my face. Next, your brain would store this knowledge over time. Finally, if you saw me again in a couple of weeks, your brain would recognize my face and use it as a cue to facilitate my name being retrieved. However, these kinds of explicit one-to-one associations are rarely encountered in everyday life. Instead, learning names of new people, places, or objects is often much more challenging. When you walk across campus, for example, you encounter numerous sights and sounds. There are construction workers, colleagues passing by, and people playing frisbee in the court. Such physical and mental environments are far too rich for you to reliably encode all the information. So given that explicit associations are not regularly observed, how does the brain process such a wide range of possible linguistic labels to allow learning to take place? Evidence indicates that explicit and implicit forms of learning involve differential allocation of information into separate and meaningful systems. In conceptual terms, explicit and implicit learning can be thought of as being at opposite ends of the same spectrum. On one end, we have explicit learning, which is depicted by the direct association between my name and my face. Explicit learning typically involves less ambiguity between items, which provides greater feedback to the learner during encoding. In contrast, on the other end of the spectrum, we have implicit learning, which is more ambiguous and provides less feedback to learners. Explicit word learning can be tested using novel objects paired with novel words. During explicit learning tasks, participants learn one-to-one associations between words and objects. Here, we can see that the word zonks is directly associated with the picture of the yellow alien. Presenting multiple trials containing explicit associations allows participants to build knowledge of new words. Implicit word learning can also be tested using novel words and objects. However, during implicit learning trials, the words are simultaneously presented with multiple objects. In contrast to explicit learning, which is facilitated via direct associations, implicit learning occurs via tracking of statistical co-occurrences. In each of the three trials shown here, we can see that the word zonks and the picture of the yellow alien repeatedly co-occur. Continued observation of these co-occurrences is thought to facilitate learning of new words. EEG is commonly used to examine brain activity during word learning. The advantage of EEG over other neuroimaging techniques is that it provides superior temporal resolution. High temporal resolution is necessary to identify rapidly changing brain activity, such as the processes that unfold during word learning. A common technique for analysing EEG data is to calculate an event-related potential, or ERP. The ERP method works by averaging the raw EEG signal across multiple trials. One particular ERP that is commonly found in the word learning literature is the N400. Calculating the N400 provides an index of learning by measuring variations in brain activity during the recognition of recently learned new words. In terms of existing gaps in the research, many studies have used EEG to investigate explicit learning of novel words. However, there is little information available on implicit learning. Furthermore, of the studies conducted on implicit learning, most have focused on behavioural measures of spoken words, with few looking at written words and even fewer examining the underlying brain mechanisms. Therefore, the overall aim of this project is to investigate how brain mechanisms underlying initial encoding and subsequent retrieval are involved during the explicit and implicit learning of novel written words. My first study focuses on explicit learning. Here we are using EEG to record brain activity from 30 healthy adults while they perform an associative new word learning task. During the learning phase, participants encode new associations between novel names and cartoon aliens. During recognition, the aliens and names are represented and participants identify whether the correct name is paired with the correct alien. Also during the recognition phase, participants are presented with known names for familiar objects. This provides a control for comparing how the learning of new words takes place. Analysis of the EEG data will involve calculating the N400 ERP. The idea here is that after one learning plus recognition phase, the pattern of brain activity will be consistent with limited learning having taken place. However, as time moves forward and we compare the brain activity after 2 sessions, then 3 sessions, then 4, we expect to see the N400 slowly become to resemble a pattern that is similar to the recognition of familiar words. Therefore, if we observe the N400 pattern change from reflecting the recognition of an unknown word to that of a known word, then we can be confident that the explicit learning of new words has been successful. Our second experiment focuses on implicit learning. Here, participants observe multiple ambiguous presentations of new words and familiar objects. Similar to the previous experiment, we are recruiting 30 people and recording their brain activity using EEG. However, this experiment is structured somewhat differently, where during the learning phase, participants learn new names for familiar items via multiple ambiguous presentations of co-occurring words and objects. Similar to the analysis of the explicit learning task, we will calculate N400 ERPs from EEG data recorded during each recognition phase. What we expect to see here are distinct N400 patterns, with effects being observed for correctly recognized congruent and incongruent word pairs in both novel and familiar word conditions. Using EEG to measure brain responses across implicit and explicit learning, we look to establish a link between neural connectivity patterns and new word learning success. Improving knowledge on the brain mechanisms responsible for new word learning in healthy adults enables us to better understand language learning and may provide a framework for research into older adults or people with neurological impairment. Specifically, this research may improve understanding of how factors such as age may mediate the influence of implicit learning on the acquisition of new words, or how top-down learning processes aid the recruitment of bottom-up signals.